Hi, I'm your host, Rowan Tonkin, and welcome to Being Planful, the show for FP&A leaders and planning experts. Hey there, welcome to Being Planful. As many of you may know, we recently held the Planful Virtual Tour. We hosted some great sessions from some great customers, and I really didn't want you guys to miss out. So let me quickly introduce one of our great sessions, Tim Zue, CFO of the Boston Red Sox. Tim is going to talk you through how he and the team set out to transform FP&A at the Red Sox. Tim is going to talk through the transformation in terms of some of the challenges, in terms of how they've expanded their capabilities across reporting, monthly forecasting, and financial close. Tim will also address how they've handled some of the challenges of a curtailed baseball season through COVID-19. Enjoy the session, and over to you, Tim.
Thanks, Annette and Rowan. Well, I'm thrilled to be here as part of the Planful Virtual Tour 2020. I'm the CFO of the Boston Red Sox, and we've been loyal Planful customers for almost going on a decade here. And I'm excited to share some insights about how we've sort of been on our technology journey and how we've used Planful and how we're helping use Planful to help us navigate through this COVID-19 crisis. So I'm going to dive right into my presentation and start just by introducing myself a little bit. When I think back on the past 25 years, I've really been fortunate to have a really wonderful career. And it's really been sort of, as I think about it, into sort of different 5-year chunks. If I take myself back to 1995, I was a student at MIT studying mechanical engineering. So I don't have an accounting background. I had a unique path to the CFO role. Spent 4 years at college, obviously. And when I graduated from college, I started a Bain & Company from 1999 to 2000 as an associate consultant. And that was really 2 formative years where I learned how to attack business problems, how to use data and information to help businesses make better and more efficient decisions. I really value that experience, met a lot of great people. Decided to do a career 180 though, and I taught 8th grade math as part of Boston Public School System. So I did that for 4 years, taught 8th grade math, taught a computer class, coached an after school basketball team, helped out with the school newspaper. It was a wonderful time in my life. I really enjoyed it, cherished the relationships I built. But also knew that probably wasn't going to be a career for me. So I was sort of searching for what was going to be next. One of the benefits of teaching, obviously, is you have the summers off. And in the summer between my 3rd and 4th year teaching, I was fortunate enough to land a summer internship with my childhood sports team that I love, the Boston Red Sox. So I emailed then CEO Larry Lucchino. It was a blind email. I didn't have a connection to him. He responded to me, which I was shocked about, and I convinced him to be an unpaid intern for the summer of 2003. And after that, they offered me a full-time job, and I've been at the Red Sox ever since 2003. And even at the Red Sox, I really think of my career in 3 phases. So the first phase, the first 5 years or so, I was a business analyst, and I was really looking at a lot of the analytical trends on our business, ticket pricing, concession trends, different impacts of different game times. And that was more, working in Excel and less about the core finance of my current responsibility. The second phase from 2010 to 2015, I was a director and vice president of business development, oversee some of our new business ventures, our travel program, our fan photo program, and a few other things. And then more recently in 2015, I took over as the CFO of the club and have been serving in that role for the last 5 years. And obviously this presentation is really more about that portion, overseeing the finance department and how we've used technology to enhance our efficiencies of our processes. So just what I want to do today is really just go through 3 different areas. The first is take you on a journey over the last really 10 years or so as we've adopted technology to improve finance processes. I think back to some of the ways we did things, not that long ago in 2010. It wasn't like it was 1950, but some of our processes were heavily paper-based, didn't have a digital component, were wildly inefficient. And we've been on this journey introducing technology throughout our operations, and I'm just going to share some of those examples. Second, I wanted to do a deeper dive on Planful. Obviously, we're here to, supported by Planful, and as I said, they've been a great partner of ours, and I really want to highlight all of the benefits of that transformation and that transition that we undertook back in 2010. And then third, given the current climate, I do want to talk about just how we're managing through this COVID-19 crisis, how we're thinking through the uncertainty and the business challenges that it's posing, and also how we're also using Planful to help us think through those scenarios as well. So I'll dive right in with the first section. Again, adoption of technology to improve our finance processes. And I have 5 examples here, and I'll just sort of walk through the kind of the before and after. So, setting up the first one, all of these slides you're going to see, a before example and an after example. And the first one was invoicing and accounts payable. And if I think back to how we used to do this, really back in 2010, it was an incredibly inefficient process. What would happen is we would get invoices mailed to us from our vendors. Those invoices would be printed out. They would be put in an inter-office envelope by our finance team. They would be sent through our mailroom to the budget manager. The budget manager would receive the envelope. They'd open the envelope. They would sign their name, write down the budget code. They'd write approve. They'd put it back in the envelope. They'd send it back through the inter-office mail. It would end up back in our finance department. That process alone, even if it was done efficiently, would take a couple days to complete. And then the finance department had to obviously input that information into our system to run the checks in the AP. So if you think about that, it's a wildly inefficient process. You're ripe for human error. In 2010, we transitioned to a digital environment for our AP. We actually built our own system. We had some developers that helped us develop a customized system. And now the way it works is, vendors email their invoices to ap@redsox.com. The system automatically recognizes the budget code and the approver and the key information, the amounts. That data gets fed into the system. The system then creates, open invoices that are then, and budget managers get daily emails and links to their open invoices, and then we can track on the back end, how much is past due, which invoices need attention. There's all sorts of reporting that we can run. So that's been an incredible game changer for that from an invoicing and accounts payable perspective. From time clock management, going back to 2010, another example, wildly inefficient process. When our ushers and ticket takers and security would show up for work for a game, the way they signed in was they signed their name on a piece of paper, and they would sign their name. They would write the time that they were in, and that was the way we tracked their time. They worked on shifts, so we weren't actually tracking the hours at the time. It was sort of a shift or not. But even then, there was no electronic component of knowing when they came to a game, and we'd then have this sign-in sheet that we would have to enter into our system to make sure that we ran the right payroll. Again, wildly inefficient, paper-based product. We transitioned to ABI in 2011. That system has been great for timekeeping. And more recently, we've taken advantage of their mobile app. So now when our usher comes to Fenway, the app recognizes that they're at Fenway. There's a geofence. They can sort of sign in on their phone. They don't even need to punch the time clock or scan their badge. We can run all sorts of reporting on the back end and make sure that the time is accurate. And it really makes the user experience that much easier and saves hundreds, not thousands of hours on our finance department time. On expense reports, the third example, again, if you look at the before side, we did everything in Excel. So when an employee had to fill out an expense report, they had an Excel template. They would pull it up. They would add the date. They'd add the vendor of the expense. They would describe it. They would code it to a certain budget code. They would ask if they had a receipt. Then the receipts, they'd obviously have to track them. When they come home from a trip and you'd have 100 receipts in your pocket, you'd have to tape them to a piece of paper and then photocopy those receipts and submit it. And so that was, again, wildly inefficient process, ripe for human error. We transitioned to Concur in 2013. Now, if I go on a business trip, every time I have an expense, just click a picture of the receipt, upload it right away, categorize it right away. It saves lots of time on the front end of the users, but more importantly, saves a ton of time on the back end as we're not, collating all these different Excel sheets and making sure there aren't errors. And so that's really improved our processes. And again, on the reporting side, the data that we're now getting in terms of expenses and what people are spending in certain categories is sort of much more easier to understand. The fourth example is on our ticketing side. As a sports team, ticketing is our most important revenue stream, and it's something that we track very, very closely. We set budget targets at the beginning of the year, and then we make sure that we're tracking towards those targets, or if we're not, then there's we communicate. Before example here, our director of ticketing would send a manual email. She would go into our ticket system. She would pull different reports, export them into an Excel template that manually that she had created, and then she would email the report daily to our management team. And that process alone probably took about an hour of time every morning. And someone like that whose time is valuable, to have to spend an hour creating those reports every day, just again seemed like an inefficiency. So now, as we made this transition in 2016, we transitioned to Tableau. So we try to use Tableau for almost all of our data reporting. There's an app where you can pull up these ticket reports. It refreshes behind the scenes every 15 minutes. The data is active. You don't have to wait to this report. And it's self-service, so people can pull up their phone, pull up the app. And we're not just doing it with ticketing. We have reports for how sales staff are doing, how they're tracking versus their goals, how our labor might be doing. All sorts of other reports are built in Tableau. So that's been really great. And then, of course, saving the best for last, our transition to Planful. When we think about budgeting and forecasting, and I am going to get into a lot more details of this process and thought process when we went through, but in the before environment, it was all Excel. We had 50 to 100 different Excel templates that were emailed out or saved on network drives, by our budget managers. And you can imagine that is a process that is ripe for human error. And I'll talk a little bit more about that as I get into the deeper dive here. But we did an extensive RFP. We looked at a lot of different alternatives, but Planful really was by far the best choice for us for a lot of reasons, which I'm going to get into in a minute here. But really, this has been just an absolute game changer in our in this goal to be more efficient and use our time more wisely and have accurate information at our fingertips. And so that's been really an incredible transition. And so those are just some 5 examples. But again, I want to now spend some time just really doing a deeper dive into the benefits of the transition to Planful and how our team has been using it and how our team has been using it, but also how the users, the end users, the budget managers have really embraced it as well. So when I think about the challenges, and I think I'll take ourselves back to 2010 when we were looking at this evolution, there were a lot of questions we were trying to answer, but really on this slide, I've tried to boil it down to really four categories of challenges. And subsequent to this slide, I have some examples of each one. So I'll just sort of read the text on this slide and then go into the details with more context moving forward here. But the first one was, our users liked Excel. They were comfortable in Excel. It's a user interface with formulas that people were comfortable with. So that was something we didn't want to lose. We didn't want to lose that comfort. But they also, as I said before, there would be formula errors. There would be breakages to external links. Documents would have links to external files that weren't in the right place, and it ended up creating massive headaches on both the QA side, the accuracy side. And so, we wanted to maintain that Excel knowledge base, but Planful provided an Excel-based syntax and a UI that transitioned, but eased the transition. So that learning curve that people have to go through when they learn a new product was really quick. People got up to speed very fast. There wasn't a lot of painful sort of transition with managers complaining about a brand new system. They embraced it right away, and of course the greater accuracy and the errors that I'll speak to in a minute. The second challenge was that our existing or pre-existing system, lacked easy administration of different layers of access to sensitive information. So, like any company, different levels of people might have access to different levels of information. Budget managers need to manage their own budgets, but they don't need to see the information from other departments. And even within a department, you might have access to expenses and things like that, but maybe you don't have access to compensation information or some other things that are, more sensitive. So it was a challenge to manage user permissions. It was a challenge to have different folders on their network, have different passwords, and we'd have to keep track of those passwords and make sure who knew what password or which user had the right permissions. And that was proved to be quite a headache at the time. Planful, and I'll get into these details again, but it allows you to manage multiple different levels of permission, access to information and reports. Really with a quick click of the button, and it's very easy to do that. And I have a couple examples in a minute. The third challenge was there was such a heavy burden on the finance team to just run this process. And while budget managers did provide input, they sort of told us what they thought they were going to spend or what they thought they might generate in revenue. It was really up to our team to just do all of the heavy lifting, both on the entry side and also on the reporting side. And Planful has a really great both self-service reporting tool, which I'll get to, but also managers just enter and approve their own submissions. And they can go in, they can use the tool themselves. And then there's obviously, like I said, generating self-service reports. And then the final one, it was very difficult to run what-if scenarios. As any business that has uncertainties and relies on assumptions, we were not set up to do multiple what-if scenarios. Our forecasting process was inefficient. And so working with Planful was really easy to generate multiple scenarios and adjust the assumptions rapidly and compare the results. So again, these are the four. I'm gonna dive into each of these with a separate slide and a few screenshots just to highlight some of the benefits and some more context as to each one. So going back to the first one, the Excel-based syntax and UI. Again, we had a user base that liked Excel, that they were comfortable in Excel. Sometimes people don't like change. Even when we made the transition to the expense reports from Excel to Concur, that transition was rocky because people weren't used to it. Anytime you introduce new things, there can be some pushback. Thankfully, because of the Excel-based syntax and the UI Planful, it was a great and easy transition. There was no problem getting people up to speed. They picked it up very easily. It's very intuitive. You can add assumptions, you can link formulas, all the things you can do in Excel, you can do in Planful. And as I talked about before, having almost 100 external workbooks being managed on different accounts with different links to different folders, and then having those links potentially be broken and trying to figure out which link is broken, and you'd be opening up these Excel files and it'd give you the message, hey, there's links to external documents and I can't find it. And then you'd sort of scratch your head and go, oh, what was this? You'd have a raw data number that didn't have a formula, and you'd have to ask the manager what they meant to put in, because as things changed, it was challenging. So and that was across 50 plus different budget managers. So you can imagine the headaches that created. Planful has the ability to have all of those different quote workbooks. They're just all in one system. They're all in one roof. So you can still have a ticketing department workbook, and you can have a finance department workbook, and you can have a workbook for sponsorship and a workbook for fan services or different categories. They're all linked together, so there's no issue with error checking. There's no issue with losing a workbook or having those links broken, and everything sort of ties together under one roof, and it makes it a lot easier. So you still have the benefit of being able to have multiple pages, multiple workbooks, but without the issues that we had with the error-prone nature of our pre-existing system. And as I said, Planful provided easy template creation, maintenance, version control, and ease of adoption. Those are just sort of the highlights of what I just covered. It was really an easy transition, and people really loved sort of the Excel-based syntax. Number two, user admin security for any company is incredibly important. And for us, as a high-profile company, some of our information, that our financial information, is probably even more sensitive as a privately held company. And so we protect security of information. We put that very highly on our priority list. And in the old system, we just couldn't do that effectively. We would have different folders, different approvals. Even within a file, maybe one page would be locked and maybe one other. It was a challenge. And Planful really makes it very easy to, number one, set up a user. You can see the screenshot of the user setup. You enter the name, department, which areas they might have access to. You can give different report access. So they might, we want to serve reports up to people. That's a big part of the benefit of Planful. But at the same time, we might want certain people to only have read access. We might not want them to be able to write reports in case they might make a mistake. So you can manage read-write permissions. You can manage permissions to different reports, put people in different buckets and groups and categories, and then set permissions to those groups and categories. On the approval role setup side, each department that we set up has different hierarchy. So our business operations might be a level 1, hierarchy, and then that might be on top of facilities, and then that might be on top of groundskeeping, and that might be on top of some other subcategory. So different users can have different approvals on the different hierarchies. So maybe the executive vice president of a department is going to have obviously access to all of those levels, and maybe the vice president might have access to level 2 on, and maybe a manager might only have access to level 4 or level 5, and they don't sort of look up the chain to parts of the information that may not be relevant to them. So the approval role setup is also really valuable as we manage security and permissions. And again, just sort of going back to the ease of use, everything is on your screen, click of a button. Our finance team is able to manage the user permissions very easily. It's been really a game changer on this side of it. Number 3, and I talked about this, the self-service nature of the product and our budget managers embracing the product and really feeling invested in the creation of their budgets and learning to enjoy the reporting. In the old system, somebody might want to report. They're going to say, hey, how am I doing on spending, relative to my budget through May? And it would take us hours to run that report. We'd have to pull out the right thing in Excel, look at our close, look at our GL, try to sort of show those actuals. And it was really cumbersome and funky. And frankly, it didn't happen very often, because when people would ask those questions, we just said, how important is this? How much? And if it was really important, if it came from our CEO, we'd find a way to get it done. But otherwise, we might say, what, it's not that easy to do. Now, in the current system, it's all self-reporting. So they have we do a monthly close every month. We push actuals into the system and then compare them to budget. So our budget managers can go in and with the click of a button, they can go in and self-service reports. So they can do get all the access to their information that they need at the click of a button, and they can enter their own submissions as well. And so, being able to spot those trends, being able to look at unexpected variances, being able to sort of see around corners has really enabled, empowered our budget managers to do a great job there. On number 4, and we talked about this, the scenario comparison reporting has really been really important too. Our prior forecast system was cumbersome, error prone, and time intensive. It would take us way too long to do anything. And so the reality was we only did a forecast twice a year. We would do a mid-year forecast, and we'd present that to ownership. And then we would do our year-end close and getting ready for our audit, and we would close the books for that. So twice a year was what we were doing from a frequency standpoint. And now we can create multiple scenarios. We have a forecast versus budget. We can enter the data into that forecast. We have the actual results. The actual results feed into the forecast results. And we have immediate visibility to allow to see what that variance analysis is within minutes. I mean, literally what used to take us days, now takes us minutes with the click of a button. So we transitioned from a semi-annual forecast to a quarterly forecast and now a monthly forecast. So now we're able to do forecasts for ownership every month. Every month we roll up the actuals, we compare them to budget. We ask budget managers, are these variances more of a timing issue? Are they a real issue? Do you expect to spend this money later? Because they budget obviously on a month-to-month basis. And then we can roll that up and send ownership, the information. Ownership doesn't like surprises. They certainly don't like bad news. Good news surprises is not bad, but any sort of surprise in our world is bad. So we try to create and communicate information in a timely way. And now we've been doing the monthly forecast, for the last couple of years with the benefit of Planful. There are other benefits. Those are the 4 sort of primary challenges. But we also, from a benefits of Planful standpoint, there's 3 other things I want to highlight. It's a cloud-based system, so the automated updates require very limited IT intervention. Behind the scenes, as they develop and enhance the product, those things are just happening behind the scenes. We don't need to run, lots of updates to the software. And from an IT perspective, going back to the pre-existing system, managing the network permissions, managing all of the headaches like that was very difficult. And so, there's really limited IT intervention. Users also don't have to be on the network to access the tool. So they can, as long as they have an internet connection, they can get online and they can work and access reports. And so they don't have to be in the office. They could be on the beach. They could be with their family. Certainly now at home, it's valuable. From a customer service side, the self-service online support is intuitive and easy to navigate. So, when people have problems, they can go online. They can look at the FAQs and see what it is. When needed, the customer service is very responsive. So when you do need to get someone on the phone, there's reps that are available to talk to you. They're very knowledgeable. It's not one of those companies that you call and wait on hold for 45 minutes to get to a live person. You can get to a live person when you need it to get that support, and that's been great. And probably one of the most important things that we value from the partnership is really the idea that they always want to be constantly improving the product. So they are their development team is proactively seeking to make product improvements every day. And they're pushing those live, and we're getting the benefits of those improvements as a customer. But they're also really responsive to requests that we make. So we might have an idea, hey, we want to be able to do this with the tool. What do you think? And they are eager to get that feedback because they want to help us. They want to create solutions for us that help us with our business. But oftentimes, the suggestion that we might make as a customer might benefit other customers. So they take that feedback, they genuinely use it and put it in their development, which is great. So that's been another benefit. I have a couple of quotes here. Ryan Scafidi, my VP of Financial Planning and Operations, he really deserves the credit for this transition. He was the one who led the charge when he said, I can't believe we're doing all this in Excel. He ran the RFP, and as we did that RFP process, Planful was the key and clear choice for us. I'll just read his quote there on the left of the slide. The Planful platform has helped transform our finance organization into a trusted team of strategic advisors for our executives and senior management team. Additionally, it has enabled us to provide information in a timely manner that is necessary to make critical business decisions that put us in the best position to succeed both on and off the field. John Lister, on the right, our Vice President of Facilities Management, he's probably our A-plus student as it relates to a manager that has adopted Planful. He has really embraced different managers embrace it at different levels, like anything, but he really loves the real-time access to reporting, all the information he can pull to make sure that he's spending, towards his goals. And his quote, you can see on the right there, Planful allows us to be more collaborative with finance and helps to understand how our actual spending aligns with our projections much earlier than in the past. With cost center reporting and Planful being available on demand, we can now proactively course correct in a timely fashion so we do not overbudget. So, the key point I think of this slide is it's been great for our finance team. That's sort of represented by Ryan's quote on the left. They've really loved the time saving that has come and the accuracy and the access to reporting. But it's also been great to what we consider our customers. That's our our budget managers and those using the tool. have really adopted it as well. So it's been great for them as well. It's been a win-win in our organization. And finally, like I talked about, I just want to sort of touch on, what we're thinking through at the Boston Red Sox as we manage and plan through the COVID-19 crisis. And before I get into that, I just want to state, obviously, I hope everybody's staying safe and their loved ones are safe and healthy. This is an incredible time for the entire world, and I think all businesses are facing incredible challenges. I don't think there's a single business that's not rethinking their business plan and rethinking, what this post-COVID world is going to look like. Whether you're the Boston Red Sox, which is obviously, in an industry that is heavily affected, given that our business is defined by large gatherings, and it's going to be a challenge for us, not just this year, but moving forward as revenues get challenged in a post-COVID world. But even if you're Amazon, a company that's certainly thriving maybe on the revenue side, but they have to think through costs and different ways of doing business with their workers and their distribution centers. So, all companies are sort of asking themselves questions as to how they can navigate this crisis. I just want to give a couple of highlights of that and how Planful has helped us thinking through some of these. So, as we think about questions, the first question is obviously we start with revenue. I think, we're trying to understand our revenue outlook for the 2020 season as a company that derives all of its revenue from hosting baseball games, and which we're not currently doing, obviously. Our revenues are incredibly challenged this year, and if there's a situation where there's no season at all, I think that players and owners are working through hopefully what will be a plan to play some baseball this year, and we're all optimistic that there will be some baseball. But that it starts there, and so I think our revenue outlook for the 2020 season is incredibly challenged, and it's not just going to be confined to 2020. So I think we're thinking about, well, what about 2021? Even in a post-COVID vaccine world, certainly people are going to have different ways that they view things. Economy is obviously different, so we're trying to think through, what does that look like, and trying to think through all the different scenarios and the uncertainty on the revenue side. On the spending side, we sort of quickly moved to try to sort of eliminate all non-essential spending. So when it became clear that we weren't going to be, back in March, we weren't going to be playing baseball certainly with fans anytime soon, we realized that we were going to have to get our expenses down to sort of the bare bones of our organization. And so with that, using Planful to do that was really valuable, because we were able to categorize different categories of expenses as essential versus non-essential. We were able to quickly roll those reports up, show department managers what we've considered essential versus non-essential, work with them to have agreement that, hey, we're not going to spend this particular expense that we thought we were going to spend in our current environment. And so being able to do that in the system, with being able to run scenarios and run reporting on the expense side and putting those into those buckets was incredibly valuable as we tried to manage the revenue decline with hopefully mitigate some of those losses with an expense decline as well. This is less about finance, but how do we ensure that our people feel connected to our organization, and how do we alleviate stress and anxiety? Obviously, this crisis is placing an incredible amount of both physical and mental stress and anxiety on everybody in the world. And we try to stay connected to our employees. Our employees are obviously the most important people in our organization. They're what make everything run. We used to host quarterly in-person town hall meetings. Those would be the entire company getting together in person once a quarter. We're now doing those virtually once a week. We're trying to remain communicating with our people, making sure they feel in touch and that we're communicating. For my own department, I'm hosting every other day, every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. We have a Zoom with my team. It's about 40, 50 people. We get together, share, communicate, but also just check in on people and just make sure that they're feeling okay. And that's certainly an important part of our plans right now. And then I think obviously the biggest question is what's happening short term, but also what's happening long term. And I think we really don't know what to expect. And because of that, trying to answer questions from ownership about, well, what does this mean for our business, et cetera, is just really challenging. So we're working through that. And I think the scenario planning that we're able to do in Planful is really helping there. It's been tremendously valuable to be able to run different scenarios and sort of transitioning to the next slide and thinking about scenarios. Diving in a little bit further, again, you can see the header, but now more than ever, we're relying on Planful to help us think through multiple different scenarios to ensure we make the best decisions for short-term and long-term objectives. There are literally hundreds, if not thousands, of branches on the tree, and each of these, there's 10 questions on this slide. Really, these are just the starting point. There's probably hundreds of questions that we've asked ourselves that we don't know the answers to, or that we have to try to anticipate the answers to. So you can imagine what that decision tree looks like if you have each of these questions as a different branch, and each path breaks off to a different branch. On the revenue side, I touched on some of these, but these are just some of the high-level things. Will we play this year? Will there be baseball? I think we all hope there will be baseball. We hope that they can do it in a safe manner and keep players and staff safe. That's obviously number one. But will there be baseball at all is a question. Will it be with or without fans is a question. If it's with fans, will there be social distancing protocols? Will there be restrictions on how many people you can have in the park? How do you serve hot dogs, beers, etc.? How many games will there be? And then again, what about 2021 and beyond? I think some of the challenges is to think both short term and long term on the revenue side. On the expense side, we're trying to figure out that the owners and players are having discussions right now about how much players might be played in a scenario where there's no fans. And then we touched on this before, but where can we reduce expenses? How do we quickly get in and identify those expenses that we can save, that we can either defer or save in a post-COVID world? What about increased expenses? Clearly, if we're going to be hosting games with fans, we're going to need to enhance our cleaning, sanitization processes. We're going to have to make sure we invest in PPE and those types of things. So we're trying to understand all of those and running scenarios on that side as well. How do we treat our employees? What are we doing there on the employee side is another question. And again, 2020 and beyond. And so Planful has allowed us to scenario plan all the different scenarios, plug them in, run different assumptions, tweak assumptions, and spit out outputs of our bottom line that sort of have the key assumptions in different settings. So that's really been great as well. So in closing here, I just again want to thank Planful for inviting me to participate in this virtual tour. I think it's a great thing to connect with people and share some insights. We at the Boston Red Sox, we understand we are faced with challenges like everybody, and we're doing our best to navigate through those challenges. And it's great to have partners like Planful to help us think through. Again, we're coming up on our 10-year anniversary. We'll have to maybe get a cake or something to celebrate our 10 years of our partnership. But we really value the partnership, the collaboration, all the help that we get. It's been really valuable, and I just really appreciate being invited to be part of this tour. And with that, I think I'll close the presentation and kick it back to you guys and say thanks. And again, everybody stay safe, and we'll talk soon.
Thanks, Tim. I hope everyone enjoyed that session as much as I did. Make sure you hit subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcast so you don't miss an episode. Thanks for stopping by.